He died on Friday evening. He slipped on wet steps at entrance, the back of my head against the curb. The sound was faint, as if someone had dropped a textbook on the floor. It was under a streetlight for minutes, the light flickering. We passed 4 people. Not one did stopped. He didn't call for 4, because that couldn't. He simply couldn't used to ask. 9 years at the blackboard taught him one thing. If you are here, speak quieter. Maybe then at least they'll pretend. At least thing he saw was a lantern. Yellow circle on the wet asphalt. Then nothing. Then cold. Then a smell. Rotten straw and iron. He opened his and saw the ceiling made gray stone. Low, in patches of soot. The body was strange. Light, without pain in lower back. No cracking in the knees. Hands slender and veiny. On neck, something. He raised his hand and felt metal. A collar. Cold. With a brand on the clasp. He sat down. All lay 6. All men. All young. Of all collars. One of them was at him with eyes and said that it would be better not touch the lock. He said that last person tried take remained without fingers. He didn't answered. He looked at his hands. 18 years old, maybe 19. Not a single scars, not a single callus. A body that has experienced. The door opened. A woman in leather vest, tall, broad-shouldered, sword at belt. She looked at them as a farmer looks at sacks of grain. I counted them. She nodded. She said that today they would be assigned. She said that someone does meet the quota by evening will receive 20 blows. She said calmly. He knew this tone. He himself said to disciples on Monday morning. Only his schedule did include punches. They were into the courtyard. The light hit in my eyes. The courtyard was huge. Stone walls were 4 stories. The red flag on tower. Sword on the flag. Academy of the Sword. It didn't know where the name it was in my head. Like in language. Just an understanding that a collar means slavery. How and knowledge that he is worth 12 copper coins. Cheaper than a chicken. Cheaper a pair of boots. Cheaper a single fencing at this academy. They were assigned among buildings. He got 3rd. Residential block for female cadets, 2nd year. 60 girls. Each of them a general or a baroness. Each learned to kill from 12 years old. His work. Water, floors, armor, laundry. He must get up at 2 hours before the wake-up, heat the water, wash the hallways, clean training armor, arrange weapons in the gym. Do not look into eyes. Don't without order. Do not be in the when the cadets are changing. For violation, the last provision was the death penalty. No punishment. Death. The elder slave explained this in the very first hour. His name was Maro, 40 years old. His left arm wouldn't bend. 3 fingers on his right hand. Maro had served here for 11 years and considered himself lucky. Maro said the main rule was simple. Don't exist. You're a rag, you're a bucket, you're a brush. You're not a human being. The sooner you understand this, the longer you'll live. Maro said the last slave in this position lasted 3 weeks. He dropped a bucket next to a cadet from the Chiron clan. She struck him in the temple with the hilt of her sword. He fell. He never got up again. Maro told this without emotion, like a schedule. Monday, water. Tuesday, floors. Wednesday, someone was killed. Thursday, armor. He listened. He knew how to listen. For 9 years, he listened to 30 teenagers who didn't give a damn about Thermopylae. He listened to colleagues who spoke about him in the 3rd person while he stood 2 steps away. He listened to the dean of students who asked him every September if he wanted to quit already. Listening was his only real skill. Not analyzing battles, not knowing tactics. Listening. The first day passed in silence. He washed the floors, carried water, cleaned the breastplates. His hands ached by evening. His knees were worn down. His back ached. This body was young but weak, untrained, unaccustomed to work. He ate in the basement, a bowl of gray porridge, a piece of bread, water. 4 other slaves were eating nearby. No one spoke. He lay down on a straw mattress in a cubbyhole by the boiler room. The ceiling was stained. The collar was tight. He closed his eyes and thought that this was surprisingly similar to his past life. The same invisibility, the same silence, the same certainty among those around him that he didn't exist. There was only one difference. Back then, he could leave. Here, there was the collar. The second day began at 4 in the morning. Dark, cold. The stone floor was icy under his bare feet. He heated water, carried buckets, scrubbed the hallway of the 3rd building. The cadets began to wake up at 6. He heard their voices through the walls, loud, confident. The voices of people who knew their place in the world. He stood by the wall with a bucket and a rag when the first group walked past. 6 girls, training armor, swords in their scabbards. They passed through him as if through air. One brushed against him with her shoulder. The bucket swayed. Water splashed onto the floor. She didn't even turn around. He wiped the floor. The second group arrived. The third. By 8 in the morning, all 60 cadets of the 2nd class had passed through that corridor. Not a single one looked at him. He was a piece of furniture. He knew that feeling. He had lived with it for 37 years. But here it had taken on a physical form. A collar around his neck. A brand on the lock. A price in the register. 12 copper coins. After breakfast, he cleaned the training hall. A large room, stone floor, racks of weapons along the walls, swords, spears, shields, wooden dummies with marks from blows. He was gathering rags and scraps of bandages from the floor when he heard voices. 2 instructors were standing at the entrance. Both women, both in full armor. They were discussing the upcoming inter-academy tournament. One said that the Western Frontier had strengthened this year. She said they had a new wedge formation, 3 lines, heavy shield bearers in front, sword fighters on the flanks, archers in the rear. The second said that was a problem. She said their cadets were used to a head-on charge, wedge against wedge, strength against strength. If the Western Frontier had changed tactics, then something needed to change. The first replied that there was nothing to change. She said that the gray she-wolves had always won by force and would continue to win by force. He knelt with a rag in his hand. He listened, and for the first time in 2 days in this world, something stirred inside him. Not fear, not despair, recognition. A wedge, 3 lines, heavy infantry in front, mobile on the flanks, archers behind the formation. He had seen this formation, seen it dozens of times, on the blackboard with chalk, in textbooks, on maps. It was canny. The year 216 BC. Hannibal against the Romans. The same principle. The heavy center holds. The flanks bypass. Archers press forward. The Romans lost 50,000 in a single day because they didn't understand that the center wasn't attacking. The center was inviting them in. The Western Frontier used a formation that was 2,000 years old, and not a single person in this academy had ever seen it, because there was no history here. Here, every battle was unique. Every tactic was reinvented. There was no library of 3,000 years of wars here, but he had one. The whole thing. In its entirety. In his head. He finished mopping the floor, gathered the rags, carried out the bucket, returned to the cubbyhole by the boiler room, sat down on the mattress. The collar was digging in. His hands smelled of lye. The map of Can was in his head. Clear, like on a school blackboard. Arrows, lines, points of failure. He knew how to break this wedge. He knew 3 ways, each proven by history, each effective. The problem lay elsewhere. He was a slave. A slave does not speak. A slave does not give advice. A slave doesn't draw diagrams on the floor. A slave mops that floor. And if he opens his mouth, They'll kill him faster than he can finish a sentence. He lay down, stared at the ceiling, thought. In his past life, he had knowledge but no one to listen. Here, he had knowledge and the right to remain silent, or to die. He closed his eyes. A streetlight on the wet asphalt. 20 minutes in the rain. 4 people walked by. It would be the same here. If he remained silent. If he chose silence again. He hadn't decided yet. But for the first time in 2 lifetimes, he had a choice. The 3rd day began just lest. 4 in the morning. Cold. Bucketfuls. He had memorized the route. Boiler room. The well in the courtyard. Training gym. Corridor of the building. Living rooms. Back. The body was getting used to it. Slowly. My hands were shaking from buckets, but already know that strong. My knees were worn, but he found a scrap of and wrapped them. Morrow looked at it and did said. That meant approval. Morrow didn't praise. Morrow simply stopped scolding him. In the morning, he was the training gym, and once again found there before everyone else. Silence. Stone walls. Pillars with weapons. Mannequins. He looked at the floor. Large. Smooth. Clean. Just a blackboard. Only horizontal. Hands reached toward the rag. The wet rag on stone leaves a mark. Dark. Visible. Temporary. He drew a line. Then a second one. Then erased it. I looked around. No one. He drew his hand again. Center. Flanks. 3 points. Western of the boundary. It stood over the wet drawing on floor and saw the battlefield. I saw how the center moves forward, how the flanks begin to bend, how the hands create pressure. He saw the trap, a clear one, classic. Hannibal would have clid. Then he heard footsteps. He had the drawing with a single swipe of the rag. He turned around. I grabbed the bucket. When the first group of female cadets entered the road, it was standing by the wall, invisible, just always. They trained for 2 hours. He watched, not because that he wanted to, but that was in the hall. A rag in hand, a bucket by my feet, eyes open. 6 cadets were practicing the wedge, standard, 3 in the center, 2 on sides, 1 behind. The instructor gave the commands. They moved in unison, quickly, powerfully. The 3 struck at the same time. Swords fell in unison, beautiful and useless. He saw it instantly. The wedge was only forward, only on head-on. If the enemy retreats and allows the center forward, then the flanks will be exposed. If the arrows strike on the fugitive line, then formation will crumble in minute. They didn't. They didn't. For them, it was the best structure in the academy. For him, this was Roman infantry at Cannae. The dead before that, they realized that dead. He remained silent. He wiped the floor. He gathered up the scraps of bandages. I changed the water. I was silent. By noon, he had had 3 rooms. The room, the armory, small hall for individual lessons. In armory, he lingered. The room was heavy. It smelled of oil and iron. The racks with swords along the walls. Shields, spears, spearheads laid out by size. Everything is order. Everything in its place. He wiped the shields when he noticed the map. A large piece of parchment on the wall. Training field. Layout. Layout for the tournament. Positions of the academies. Standings from years. He stopped. He looked. His heart was beating faster. That was a map of the most recent inter-academic tournaments. Location of the units. Directions of attack. Results. Everything is drawn from by hand, roughly, but legible. He stood in front of this map and saw a pattern. The Ocean of the Sword defeated 3 years in a row. One and that way. Wedge towards center. Pressure. Breakthrough. Force against force. 3 years it worked because that they were stronger. But the ocean of the last year showed the gap was narrowing. The western frontier lost by the narrowest of margins. The northern wall came close. Even the Silver Shield Academy, which had been considered weak, moved up 2 spots. All 3 academies began to adapt. All 3 began to flank their opponents. All 3 realized that a head-on assault against the Red Sword wouldn't work. And all 3 began to look for another way. But the Red Sword kept doing the same thing. Head-on, wedge against wedge, stronger, more powerful, faster. Like the Romans who built up their legions thinking the problem was numbers, until Hannibal showed that the problem was in their thinking. He memorized the map, every line, every mark, every result. He'd always had a good memory. 9 years of dates and names. He could reconstruct the layout of any battle from the school curriculum from memory. And now he'd memorized this map too. He finished cleaning up and went out. In the hallway, he bumped into a cadet. Almost bumped into her. She was walking fast. He stepped back against the wall, pressed himself against it, lowered his eyes. She walked past. Red hair, short, shoulder length, a head and a half taller than him, broad shoulders, a sword at her belt with a red-wrapped hilt. Upperclassman, 3rd or 4th year. She walked past and didn't look. He stood by the wall and waited for the footsteps to fade. Then he picked up the bucket and moved on. That evening, in his tiny room, he lay on the mattress and thought. The map was etched in his mind. The Red Sword's wedge, the flanks of the western frontier, the arrows of the northern wall. 3 academies had changed. The Red Sword was gone. This was France before 1941. The Maginot Line. The best fortifications in the world. Impenetrable. Perfect. Useless. Because the Germans simply bypassed them. The Red Sword was building its own Maginot Line, out of swords and shields, out of strength and tradition, out of reputation and pride. And sooner or later, someone would bypass it. He saw it. The 2 instructors in the hall didn't see it. They saw tactics. He saw a pattern. The difference between a tactician and a historian is that a tactician decides a single battle. A historian sees 1,000 battles layered one on top of the other. And in that 1,000, every mistake has already been made. Every failure has already happened. You just have to recognize it when you see it. Day 4, 5, 6. He worked. He was silent. He watched. Every day in the training hall, he saw the same thing. The clinch, the straight punch, strength, speed, power. Not a single deceptive combination. Not a single feigned retreat. Not a single flanking maneuver. They trained a single movement. Forward. Always forward. Like the Roman legions. Like Napoleon's guard at Waterloo. Like any army that believes the greatest virtue is the strike. Every evening he returned to his tiny room. He lay down. He thought. Schemes multiplied in his head. Cannae, Austerlitz, Ilipa, Leuctra, Gaugamela. Every battle he had taught for 9 years now took on new meaning. Not as a date in a textbook, not as a paragraph for a test, as an instruction, as a blueprint, as a weapon, one he could not use. On the 7th day, something changed. He was cleaning the small hall after evening practice. It was late. Almost everyone had left. He was gathering scraps of bandages and mopping the floor when he heard a sound. A blow. Another blow. Another. Someone was striking the dummy in the far corner of the hall. He looked up. A cadet. Alone. Without armor. In a training shirt. Red hair. The same one from the hallway. She was striking the dummy with a sword, again and again. Quickly, hard, but wrong. He saw it right away. It wasn't the strike that was bad. The strike was excellent, powerful and precise. The problem was her feet. She was putting her left foot too far forward. With every strike, her weight shifted to her front leg. She left her right side open, every time, over and over. If the dummy could have struck back, it would have hit her in the ribs on the third strike. She didn't know that, because dummies don't strike back, and the instructors were looking at the power of the strike, not her footwork. He stood there with a rag in his hand, watching, silent. She struck 12 more times, the same mistake every time. Left leg, weight forward, open side. He counted. 12 strikes. 12 times she would be dead in a real fight. She stopped, breathing heavily. She wiped her face with her sleeve, turned around, saw him. Her face changed, from tired to hard. She said he was staring. She said it quietly, coldly, like a statement of fact followed by a verdict. He lowered his eyes, said he was just cleaning up. She came closer, 2 steps. He saw her boots, leather, worn, with stains from the training ground. She said that slaves don't look at cadets. She said that was the rule. She said that if she caught him looking at her again, he wouldn't need a bucket. He'd need a coffin. She left. He stood there with the rag. His hands weren't shaking. Strange. He thought they would shake. But no. Maybe because he'd already died once. Wet steps. A streetlight. 20 minutes. When you've already died, the threat of death sounds different. Not quieter, just more familiar. He finished cleaning, went back to the cubbyhole. He lay down, closed his eyes. An image lingered in his mind. Left leg, weight forward, open side, 12 times. He wasn't going to tell her. He had no right. He was a slave. She was a cadet from a family that could buy 100 like him with their lunch change. He wasn't going to say anything. He repeated this to himself until he fell asleep. He held out a 3 days. 3 days he cleaned small room in evenings, and every time she was there. Every time alone. Every time after lights out. Every time on mannequin. And every time the left leg went forward. The weight on the foot. Open right side. He counted. 14 strikes in the evening. 18 on 22. 20 at 3. She increased the intensity. She hit harder, faster, more viciously. And every blow drove the mistake deeper into muscle memory. Like a student who cramming the wrong formula. Then more repetitions, the harder to unlearn. He knew that. 9 years he had. That the student who remembered the date incorrectly will remember it incorrectly for years. The body works like that. Muscles remember. And muscles don't distinguish the correct and wrong. They memorize what that is repeated. On the 3rd evening, she stopped earlier than usual. She bent over. She braced her hands on knees. She was heavily. Then straightened up and struck again. And he saw something new. She winced. Pain. Right side. She stretched a muscle. Or a ligament. That's there. Is it have the, if the mannequin hit in response. The itself told her that position was wrong. Overloading to the right side. Uneven distribution of weight. The body protested. She didn't. She hit harder. After pain. Clenching my teeth. Like a person who believes that any problem can solve if you hit harder. He stood by the wall. The rag in his hand. A bucket by my feet. Mouth is closed. 10th day on this world. 10 days silence. 10 days of observation. 10 days rags and buckets. Last. Past life he remained silent 37 years. Here he stayed 10 days. She struck. Time. She grimaced. She lowered sword. With her hand grabbed her side. She exhaled. She raised sword. I took a swing. He said that it was left leg. Silence. The sword hung in the air. It slowly turned her head. She looked at him. Her lips are gray, cold. His face is expressionless. She lowered sword. She looked toward him completely. He felt that the air in the room became heavy, as before a storm. She took a step toward him. He did back down. Not because that he brave, it that his didn't moved. She said that he that. The voice is quiet, steady, dangerous. He swallowed. He said that her left leg is too far forward. He said that at impact the weight shifts forward and the right side opens up. He said that that's it hurts. She looked at him. She blinking. 3 seconds. 5. He counted because that there wasn't else could do. On 8th second, she took toward him. She grabbed by throat. With one hand, lifted him up, pressed to the wall. His legs came loose from the floor. The collar crashed into skin. It couldn't breathe. She was him with hand and even didn't straining. The cadet 3rd year of the Red Sword. The general. 3 years of date for 6 hours a day. For her, he weighed as a bucket. She said that slave doesn't speaks. The slave does not looks. A slave does not his in the cadet. She said that this people get killed. She said that it was enough to call the instructor, and in the morning his body will lie in by the wall where they used mannequins. He was gasping for air. Spots danced before his eyes. He thought he was going to die a second time. Faster this time. No streetlight, no wet asphalt. Just a wall, a hand around his throat, and the smell of gun oil. She loosened her grip. He fell. His knees hit the stone. He coughed. He gasped for air. She stood over him, looking down. He raised his head, looked at her, and said that if she didn't fix her foot, they'd kill her in the 3rd round of the tournament. Any opponent who sees the pattern will strike her exposed side, and she won't even realize where the blow came from, because her body will be in motion, her weight on her front leg. She won't have time to turn. She froze, sword in hand, he on his knees, a collar around his neck, a rag on the floor next to an overturned bucket, water spread across the stone. She said he was bluffing, said that no slave knows sword technique. He said it wasn't about sword technique. It was about body position. Anyone who's seen enough fights will spot this mistake. She asked how many fights he'd seen. He thought. 3,000 years, tens of thousands of battles, millions of dead, chalk on a board. He said that was a lot. She was silent. Then she said that if he was lying, she would kill him herself. Without an instructor, without witnesses. Then she walked over to the dummy, took a stance, looked at him, waited. He stood up. His knees were wet. His throat hurt. His voice was hoarse. He said she needed to move her left foot back, half a step, maybe a little more. Her weight should be centered, not on the front leg, centered, between both feet, so that when she struck, she could shift to either side. She looked at him. Then she moved her foot. She struck, slowly, testing it out. She struck again, faster, again, again. 12 strikes. He watched. Her right side remained closed, weight centered, turns faster. The strikes were slightly weaker because she wasn't putting her whole body into them anymore, but more accurate, and her side didn't hurt. She stopped. She looked at her feet, then at him. She said nothing. She turned and walked away. He stood alone in the hall. Water on the floor, an overturned bucket, his throat marked with red fingerprints. He picked up a rag, wiped up the water, picked up the bucket, finished cleaning, returned to the cubbyhole. He lay down. The collar pressed against his throat, which already ached from her grip. He lay there and thought about what he had done. He had broken every rule. He had spoken to a cadet, without orders, without permission. He had given her advice on fighting technique. A slave, a servant for 12 coins. He had corrected the general's daughter. Morrow would say he was an idiot. Morrow would be right. But that wasn't what he was thinking about. He was thinking about her face when she struck 12 times and his side didn't hurt. There was no gratitude. There was no surprise. There was recognition. The face of a person who had done something right and felt it in their body before their mind understood it. He had seen that face hundreds of times. In students. The moment when the formula clicks. When a date stops being a set of numbers and becomes an event. When a map stops being a picture and becomes a battlefield. That moment can't be faked. And it happened. The next day, he waited for the consequences. Waited for them to come after him. That the instructor would summon him. That Mara would say he was on the disposal list. Nothing happened. He scrubbed the floors, carried water, cleaned the armor. No one came. She didn't tell anyone. He didn't know why. Maybe contempt. Admitting that a slave had given her advice, and that the advice had been useful, was worse than keeping silent. Maybe calculation. If the advice works, why kill the source? Maybe something else he didn't understand. In the evening, he was cleaning the small hall. She came, as usual, alone, after lights out. She stood by the dummy. She started striking. Left foot half a step back. Weight centered. She remembered. He was mopping the floor and watching out of the corner of his eye. 20 strikes. 30. His side didn't hurt. She was moving faster. Her turns were cleaner. Her strikes more precise. On the 35th strike, she stopped. Looked at him. Said that was one mistake. Said that if he saw one, he could see the others too. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A test. He could have stayed silent. He should have stayed silent. Instead, he said he saw 3 more. She thrust the sword into the floor, crossed her arms, told him to speak. He spoke for 20 minutes. About grip. About the body's rotation during a thrust. About the shield's momentum after a block. He didn't know the terms of this world. He was describing physics, weight, angles, inertia, points of support. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't nod, just stood there and listened. When he finished, she was silent for a minute. Then she said one word, tomorrow, and left. He stood in the hall, a rag in his hand, a bucket at his feet. His throat was sore, but not from her grip. From the fact that he had spoken for 20 minutes straight, for the first time in 10 days. For the first time, someone had listened to him, really listened, not because they had to, not because he was a teacher and the classroom was supposed to be quiet. She listened because she needed what he knew. He returned to the cubbyhole. He lay down. The collar was tight, but it felt different somehow. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if he'd survive the week, didn't know what she'd do with what she'd heard. But he knew one thing. Tomorrow she would come, and he would speak, because that was the only thing he knew how to do well. In any world, in any body, with or without the collar. She came the next evening, and the next, and the next after. 5 evenings in a row, always after lights out, always alone, always in small room. He was cleaning up. She was working out. Then she stopped and looked at him. That was the signal. He put the rag and spoke. The first 2 nights, he analyzed her stand, the position of the legs, grip of the sword, angle of the during blocking. It didn't know how to teach at the academy. I didn't know the terms. Didn't schools. He knew physics, center of gravity, inertia, lever. He explained this. She tried, silently, without questions. She struck. I corrected it. I hit again. I checked with my body. On 3rd evening, she spoke more than 1 sentence. She said that the instructor Vera noticed a change in her technique. I said that Vera asked who had corrected. He froze. My hands went cold. She said that replied that herself. She said that Vera didn't believe, but didn't press. He exhaled. She looked at him and said that if he ever tells Tu about these evenings, then she will kill him. Not because that he a slave, because that she the general of Chiron, and if anyone finds out that she is taking advice from that her family will survive this shame. The Chiron, he remembered. He didn't know what it meant in hierarchy of world, but according that, since she said it name, he realized that it weighs more than 12 copper coins, more than his life, more than 10 of his lives. Her name, Ren. He found this by chance. On fourth evening in the hallway, after practice, someone called out her. Ren. 2 syllables, short, sharp, like she herself. Ren Chiron, third year, the general, commander of the training gray she-wolves. He put this into piece in 5 days. From conversations I've had in today, I've so far and played to the floors. From snippets of phrases from the instructors. From a list on the wall in the room. Gray she-wolves, 6 cadets, the elite of the 3rd year. Ren was in charge of them since 1st year. 3 years, not a single defeat in domestic matches, the best group in the division. And it came to him every evening, to slave with a rag. That's that the slave saw something what did the instructors. On 5th evening she didn't look alone. He heard footsteps. Not 1 person, 2. He was standing by the wall with a bucket. The door opened. Ren. Behind a second one, short, thin, dark hair is tied in a bun. These with his back, quiver on belt. Hands are slender, fingers are long. Archer. Ren said that it May from the wolves, said that May has a problem. May was standing by the door and looked at him. In the eyes there was contempt. There was fear. There was fear of him. Fear in general. Total. Deep-seated. Like stain that can't come out. Ren said that May could shoot. During practice. Maybe at the target. But when the training combat, her hands are trembling. Arrows fly miss. The instructors believe that the problem lies the technique. They installed additional training sessions. More shooting, more repetitions, more targets. It helped. He looked at May. She was standing by the wall, her body. Fingers trembled. She didn't look at in eyes. She looked at floor. He realized it instantly. Not like a tactician. As a teacher. 9 years, 30 teenagers. There were those who could answer at the blackboard. They knew the material. At home, solve without mistakes. But on the board in the class, our hands began to tremble. My voice faded. The chalk crumbled in fingers. This wasn't a problem knowledge. It nada of. This of pressure. May has forgotten shoot. May was afraid to miss in witnesses. He said that. Just and straightforwardly. He said that it wasn't in hands in fine. That is head. During training, she alone. That doesn't looks. The target does not evaluates. In that around people. Ours. Strangers. Instructors. Everyone are watching. And hands start remember not how to shoot, but what would happen if they missed. May lifted her head. She looked at him. For the first time. Her eyes were wet. She didn't say anything, but he saw. He had hit the mark. Right on the spot. The very spot the instructors hadn't seen, because the instructors were treating the hands while the head was hurting. Ren looked at him, silently. He said they had to start small. Shoot with 1 witness, then 2, then 3, gradually. Not targets. People. Let Ren stand nearby. Just stand there. May shoots. Gets used to it. Then add 1 more person. Then another. The body has to get used to the presence of strangers' eyes, just as it gets used to the weight of the bow. gradually, through repetition. May said one word, "Thank you," quietly, almost a whisper. They left. He stood in the hall, a rag in his hand. He had just done what he'd been doing for 9 years. Listened, saw the problem, offered a solution. Not a tactical one, a human one. He isn't a shooting coach, he's a teacher. A teacher who knows that trembling hands at the target aren't cured by extra drills, but by safety. By the feeling that a mistake won't kill you. The next evening, Ren brought a third girl. Tall, wider in the shoulders than Ren. Short, light hair, a shield bearer. Tara. Tara didn't shake. Tara was angry. She stood in the middle of the hall, crossed her arms, looked down at him, said that Ren had lost her mind, said that listening to a slave was rock bottom, said that if anyone found out, they'd be kicked out of the academy before dawn. Ren said Tara could leave. Tara didn't leave. Tara stayed. Because Tara had seen how Ren's stance had changed over the past 5 days. She'd seen how May hit the bullseye for the first time in a month, with 3 witnesses. Tara was angry, but not stupid. Anger got in the way. Stupidity would have helped. Smart people are harder to deal with. He figured out Tara's tactics in 20 minutes. Shield bearer, front line, takes the hit, holds the formation. Tara held her shield too high. She protected her head and chest. She left her legs exposed. At this academy, everyone aimed for the torso. Head-on strike, force against force. But if an opponent strikes at the legs, and sooner or later someone here would figure that out, Tara would fall first. He explained. Tara listened, silently, with a face that said she wanted to hit him with her shield. But she listened. Then she tried it. She lowered her shield by 2 fingers, took a blow from Ren, stood her ground. She took another one, feet in place, better balance. Tara looked at the shield, then at him. She said nothing, but she stopped looking at it like a piece of furniture. She started looking at it like a tool. It wasn't respect. It was an acknowledgement of its usefulness. For a slave, that's the most she could do. 3 days later, there were 6 of them, all gray wolves. Ren, May, Tara, a short girl named Lyra with 2 blades who was faster than anyone but couldn't work in formation. The tall, silent Sai with a spear, who placed her feet perfectly but couldn't see the field beyond 3 steps. And Nor. Nor was a problem. Nor was a war mage, the only mage in the group. She could do something with the air. He didn't quite understand it. Short bursts, directed, enough to throw off an archer's aim or push a shield bearer. Nor was quiet, quieter than May, quieter than he was. She was the last to arrive. She sat in the corner. She watched. For 2 evenings, she just watched. On the 3rd, she approached. She said she had a question, not about technique, about tactics. She asked why a mage always stood at the back of the formation. He looked at her. He asked where a mage stood according to regulations. She said behind the formation, in the 3rd line, next to the archers. A mage's task is support, to take out enemy archers, to deflect spears, to cover the flank. He thought for a moment. In his world, there was no magic. But there was artillery, and artillery had followed the same path. First behind, then closer to the formation, then alongside the formation, then in front of the formation. Gustavus Adolphus understood this in the 17th century. Field guns in the infantry line, not behind, together. Because support weapons that stand far from the battle provide poor support. He said that if her abilities work at close range, she has no business being in the 3rd line. Her place is in the 2nd, next to the swordswomen, not behind the shields, between the shields. Nor looked at him, for a long time. Then she said that not a single instructor in 3 years had suggested she change her position. She said the regulations were written 200 years ago, and no one had changed them since. He thought that 200 years was nothing. On Earth, some regulations hadn't changed for 500 years. Until someone came along and proved that the regulations killed more soldiers than the enemy. 6 people, every evening. The armory after lights out. Chalk on the stone floor. He drew diagrams, erased them, drew them again, explained. They argued. Tara argued the loudest. May was silent, but tried first. Ren listened and asked one question at the end. Always the same one, always precise. He knelt before them, chalk in his hand, a collar around his neck. 6 faces lit by a single oil lamp. 6 pairs of eyes that looked at him and saw not a slave, not a servant, not a rag. They saw a man who knew something important. He remembered his class. 30 faces on phones, 4s in anonymous surveys. For 9 years, he had dreamed of exactly this, of 6 pairs of eyes that watch and listen. The irony was cruel. He had to die and become a slave to become a teacher. 2 weeks. 14 evenings in the armory. Mel on stone. An oil lamp. 6 faces in the twilight. He drew diagrams and erased them until dawn. Not a trace. Not a single evidence. Every morning stone floor was clean. Every morning he became a rag and a bucket. During the day, he washed the hallways and listened. He listened to everything. The conversations of the cadets in dining hall. Shouts from on parade ground. Whispers of the in-basement. He was gathering information, just collected dates for lessons. Systematically. Eagerly. Without discrimination. That's that in a world any little thing can turn out a lesson. In 2 weeks, he learned about the tournament enough. Inter-academic tournament was held once a year. 4 academies. Red Sword, Western Boundary, Northern Wall, Silver Shield. Each put 3 groups of 6 fighters. The groups fought 1 against 1. Points were tallied. Academy with the number wins received the right to pick in assignment. The allocation meant the assignment of female graduates to Army units. The best academy received the best positions. General positions, command of fortresses, capital garrisons. The worst received the border, outposts on the outskirts, swamps and steppes. For the daughters, generals, this was worse than death. Not because that dangerous, because it's inglorious. A race that sends his daughter to the outpost loses face. That loses face loses everything. Earth, titles, marriages, places in the council. The tournament was not a sport. The tournament was a war of a training field. And until the tournament, there were 6 weeks. The Gray were the best group of the year. But 3rd year was a graduating class. The 4th was. And at the even went the 4th year. The She-Wolves were as reserve, as a replacement in case injury, as spectators in shape. Renee was furious. He saw it every night. She was the mannequin after class. She didn't practice the technique. I was her anger. She said once that the older in the group are weaker. She said that the 3rd group of the 4th year lost the Wolfuses in home tournament 2 weeks ago. I lost fair and square. No a chance. But in the tournament are the older because that's is. Because that the rules. Because that the procedure. Because that the 4th year is the 4th year and the 3rd this the 3rd. He was listening. He recognized. This was any army in history. Advancement through merit and not base talent. Seniority instead of competence. The French army before Sedan. Russian before Mukden. British before Soma. Systems that were age above capabilities and then wondered why they lose. But he could change. He could change only what was in the after lights out. And he did. The first week, he worked with each on separately. Stance, grip, balance. Stance and formation. Individual errors. At each has their own. May was afraid strangers' eyes. Tara raised her shield. Lyra didn't feel tune. Sai didn't see the field, nor was too far from it. Ren put her whole body into every strike, leaving herself exposed for a split second. In the second week, he started working with the group, and that's when everything changed. Because individual technique is one thing, formation is another. 6 people who fight well on their own are 6 fighters. 6 people who move as one are an army. The difference between the first and the second is the difference between a mob and a phalanx, between a militia and a legion. He started simple. He drew 6 dots on the floor with chalk. He told each of them to stand on their own. Terra in the center, shield, front line. Ren and Lyra on the flanks, swords, flanks. Sai with a spear behind Terra, second line, depth. Nor next to Sai, support. Mei behind everyone, archer. Ren said this was a standard formation. She said they'd been standing like this since their first year. He said the formation was correct. The problem wasn't where they stood. The problem is how they move. He asked Ren to attack. She took a step forward. She struck the air. Lyra took a step at the same time. Terra stayed put. Sai swayed backward. Mei didn't move, nor turned her head to see what Ren was doing. 5 people. 5 different reactions. Not a single one matched. He said, "There, that's the problem. You're 6 separate people, not a formation. Each of you reacts differently, each at your own pace. When Ren attacks, Terra needs to take half a step forward to cover the right flank. Lyra needs to step half a step to the side to widen the front. Sai needs to fill the space Ren has vacated. Nor must shift to the right flank because that's where the counterattack will come from. Mei must step back a pace to increase her shooting range. 1 action by Ren, 5 reactions from the others. Synchronized, instantaneous, automatic, like breathing. Terra said it was impossible. She said they weren't telepaths. He said Roman legionnaires weren't telepaths either. They were peasants who trained in formation for 6 months before they ever saw a battlefield. 6 months of the same movements. Step forward, step back. Shield to the left, shield to the right. Strike, block. Every day, every hour, until their bodies remembered. Until their neighbor's movement became a cue for their own. They didn't have 6 months. They had 6 weeks, even less. They weren't going to a tournament. They were reserves. But he saw something they didn't. He saw that the 3 fourth-year groups were training just like everyone else. A wedge into the forehead, strength against strength, individual skill, no synchronization, no system. If the gray she-wolves learned to move as a single organism in 6 weeks, they would be stronger than any 4th-year group. Not because they fought better, because they fought together. He didn't say that out loud. Not now. He only said they needed to train their coordination, moving in pairs, then in threes, then as a whole group, every evening. The same thing every time, until it becomes automatic. They started that very evening. Ren and Terra, swordswoman and shield bearer, the base pair. Ren attacks, Terra covers. He stood by the wall and watched, corrected, half a step, a little to the left, lower the shield a finger's width, faster, slower, one more time. They moved clumsily. They lost their footing. They got in each other's way. Terra hit Ren on the shoulder with the edge of her shield twice. Ren stepped on Terra's foot once. It wasn't pretty. It was slow. It was right. Because that's how formation begins. With clumsy steps. With mistakes. With elbows in the ribs and feet underfoot. Then the muscles remember. Then your partner's body becomes an extension of your own. Then the formation begins to breathe. They trained for 2 hours. He noticed that Ren was tired. She never showed her fatigue, but he could see it. A pause for a split second. Slightly heavier breathing, shoulders slightly lower. He called stop. Ren looked at him. He said that was enough for today. The muscles were tired. Tired muscles remember mistakes. It's better to end on the right move than to continue on the wrong one. Tara snorted. She said that a slave was bossing around the general's daughters. The world had turned upside down. But she stopped. Ren did too. They knew he was right, or were beginning to know. When they left, he was alone. He wiped the chalk off the floor, wiped the stone with a rag, erased the traces. Every evening, the same thing. He drew and erased. He taught and hid, like an underground school. He thought about that. There had been underground schools in history. Poland under occupation, Afghanistan under the Taliban, places where teaching was a crime, where they were shot for a math lesson. He never thought he'd end up in such a school, especially as a teacher, especially with a collar around his neck. Morrow noticed he was coming back late. Morrow didn't say anything, but he looked, for a long time, intently. Morrow had survived 11 years at the academy, not because he was strong, because he was observant. He saw things. He noticed patterns. A slave who stays out 2 hours late every night is a pattern. A pattern is a risk. Morrow said only one thing. He said that a slave who draws attention doesn't live long. He nodded. Morrow was right. Morrow was right about everything concerning survival. But Morrow had survived for 11 years. He didn't want to survive. He wanted to teach. The difference seemed insignificant. It was enormous. Third week. They moved from pairs to threes. Ren, Tara, Lyra. Front line. 3 bodies, 3 swords, 1 shield. He placed them in the riff and gave orders. Step, strike, block, turn. Again, again, again. Lyra was the problem. 2 blades, fast, very fast, faster anyone in the group. But Lyra fought like a duelist, not like a soldier. She accelerated when necessary to slow down. It rushed ahead when the formation demanded to keep the line. Every one time when Ran attacked from the right, Lyra instead, that to cover the flank, rushed to attack too. 2 swordswomen in front, a shield bearer behind, a hole on the left. He stopped them once at Plamik, Lyra. Stop. Back. Your place is... not there, here. Lyra was angry, not like Tara. Tara was angry silently and went about her business. Lyra was angry and argued. She said that a quick strike decides the fight. She said that if she kills the enemy before then he strikes, that there's month. He said that Achilles also thought. 1 hero in front, the rest behind. This works as long as the hero is alive. When the hero falls, the army runs. She said, "Who is Achilles?" He said that warrior, the best in his generation, the fastest, the strongest, unbeatable. Perished by a single arrow because that was ahead of the formation. Alone. Lyra fell silent. Then she stood her feet. Then began hold the line. Not right away, not perfect, but a start. The 3 was more difficult. Say, nor, may. Spear, magic, bow. 3 different weapons, 3 different ranges, 3 different paces. Sai worked on middle distance, Nor at close range, May on the far side. Synchronize them meant create a system of fire. He thought about this for days before I drew the diagram. Sai holds space as shield bearer. The spear strikes those who have through the line. Nor is to the right. Her outbursts work like shotgun pellets, short, targeted. They disrupt the line of the attacker, give Sai a second to strike. May behind both of them. She shoots through gaps, over their heads, between the shoulders, aiming. He explained this and saw 6 identical expressions. Skepticism. Ren asked where he. She asked where he learned. He said that he had read. She asked what he was reading. He said what books. She asked which books. She know the slave in 12 coins. He remained silent. He could answer. He could say that had Clausewitz and Sunze and Liddell Garth. Could explain would I work 9 years in a room with 30 teenagers and a map on the wall. What every Monday drew with chalk on the A of map in 200 or 500 or 2,000 years. What its library is 3,000 years of others' deaths. He said he didn't remember, said that knowledge simply exists. Ren looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "All right." That all right was worth more than any other word. It meant she had stopped asking where it came from. She began asking what came next. On the 4th day of the 3rd week, the first trial took place. Internal sparring. Every third-year group against every other. A round-robin tournament. Training weapons, wooden swords, blunt arrows, full armor. Instructors in the stands. He stood by the wall with a bucket. His job was to bring water, to clean up the blood if there was any, to collect the broken arrows, to be invisible. The Grey She-Wolves entered the first battle against a group called the Steel Sisters. 6 against 6. A training field half the size of the hall. He watched. His heart was pounding. He wasn't fighting. He stood by the wall with a rag, but his heart was pounding as if he were the one stepping onto the field. Ren lined up the group. Standard formation. Just like every training session. Just like the instructors taught. He waited. He watched. The Steel Sisters moved forward. A wedge. A head-on charge. 3 swordswomen in front. A spearwoman and an archer behind. A mage on the flank. Standard. Ren raised her sword. The wolfesses moved. And he saw it. Tara stepped forward with Ren. Not a second later. Together. Lyra held the left flank. Didn't rush ahead. Held her position. Sai filled the space behind Tara. Nor shifted to the right. May took a step back. 1 move by Ren. 5 synchronized reactions. Not perfect. Lyra was slightly late. Sai stood half a step to the left of where she needed to be. But they moved together, like a single organism, not like 6 separate fighters. The Steel Sisters struck at the center. Tara took the blow on her shield. Ren counterattacked from the right. Lyra came in from the left. Double wrap. The simplest maneuver. So simple that no one here had used it. Because here they attacked head-on. Always head-on. The Steel Sisters' center swordswoman found herself between Ren and Lyra. She turned toward Ren, exposed her back to Lyra. Lyra struck her ribs with a wooden sword. Clean hit. 1 second. First defeat. The instructor in the stands raised a flag. The fight continued 5 against 6. May fired from behind. A blunt arrow struck the second swordswoman in the shoulder. Not hard, but she flinched. She lost her rhythm. Sai jabbed her spear into the exposed side. Second flag. 4 to 6. It was over in 3 minutes. The Grey Wolf women won without a single casualty. 6 to 0. For the first time in the history of the 3rd-year internal trials. Instructor Vera stood in the stands and watched. Not at Ren, at the formation, at the way they moved. He saw her face. There was something new there. Not surprise. A question. Where from? The second fight was an hour later, against the Crimson Spears. The Grey She-Wolves won 5 to 1. The loss of Lyra. She'd broken away in the final minute after all. Old habits. The 3rd match. The 4th. Victories. Clean. Quick. Systematic. They didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they were together. The difference was visible to the naked eye. He stood by the wall, a rag in his hand, his face motionless. Inside, everything was burning. Not pride, recognition. He'd seen it at school competitions, when the team he'd trained for 2 months went out and won, not because each member was the best, but because each knew what the person next to them was doing. The same principle, the same mechanics. Different stakes. At the competition, the losers received certificates of participation. Here, the losers received a post at the edge of the world. It was quiet in the armory that evening. They were sitting on the floor, the six of them and him. Tara said that Instructor Vera had been asking questions. She asked about formation, about synchronization, about double coverage. Tara said she'd answered evasively, said they'd been training on their own. Vera didn't believe her. Ren said that was a problem. She said that 4 wins without a single loss was too conspicuous, too abrupt. 3 weeks ago, they were a good group. Now, they were the best group in the class. Such leaps don't happen without a reason. The instructors would look for a reason. He sat on the floor, a chalk in his hand, a collar around his neck. He thought. She was right. He knew it. Success attracts attention. Attention attracts questions. Questions lead to him. A slave teaching female cadets is not a violation of the rules. It is the destruction of order. An order in which knowledge belongs to the free, in which a slave is a rag, a bucket, a voiceless tool. If they find out that a rag is teaching generals' daughters tactics, it won't be the rule that collapses. The idea will collapse. The idea that slaves don't think, that furniture doesn't speak, that 12 copper coins is the ceiling of a man's worth. Systems don't forgive those who prove the system is wrong. He said we need to slow down, make the next review worse. Don't lose, but win more dirty, with losses, without double coverage. Go back to the standard wedge for a single fight. Show the instructors what they want to see. Progress, but not a revolution. Tara said that was cowardice. Ren said it was tactics. Silence. Then Ren said he was right. Better to lose this round now than lose everything later. They left. He wiped away the chalk, scrubbed the floor, covered his tracks. His hands moved automatically. His mind was working. Vera, the instructor who asks the questions. It was the first call. Quiet. Distant. But he heard it. The clock began to tick. Next inspection took, as he said. Dirty. Gray she-wolves won 3 matches out of 4. 1 we lost. Based his plan. Ren hated every second of defeat. He saw it in her back. By that, as she gripped the hilt of the sword after the final flag. The way she walked off the field without looking back. She knew how to lose. But she didn't like it. And she didn't know how to lose on purpose. For her, that was worse than a real defeat. A real defeat is honest. A deliberate one is a lie. And Ren Kairen hated lies. He figured that out in 3 weeks. Not because she said so. She never spoke about herself. He learned it from the way she behaved. Ren didn't play games. She didn't flatter. She didn't beat around the bush. Ren went straight at you. Like a wedge. Like a head-on collision. She was a product of this academy. A perfect product. Strength. Directness. A head-on collision. And that was exactly why she had come to him. Because somewhere, deep down, she understood that directness was a wall. A beautiful one. A sturdy one. One that people went around. Vera stopped asking questions. The defeat had worked. A single loss. An uneven fight. The usual progress of an ordinary group. Nothing special. Vera nodded and left. The first call fell silent. He exhaled. But he knew there would be a second. And a third. The question wasn't whether it would ring. The question was when. By the 4th week, he began teaching tactics. Not formation. Not technique. Tactics. He explained the difference between these concepts on the very first evening. Technique is how you strike. Formation is how you stand. Tactics is why you do what you do. Technique is responsible for the strike. Formation for order. Tactics for decision-making. He drew 2 groups on the floor, 6 against 6, a standard field. He said that until now they had learned to move together. Now they needed to learn to think together. He told them about Kana, without mentioning Kana. He told how one commander set up a weak center and strong flanks, how the center began to retreat, how the enemy decided they were winning and pressed harder, how the flanks closed in, how the enemy found themselves surrounded, how 50,000 died in a single day because they believed that retreat was a sign of weakness. 6 pairs of eyes in the semi-darkness, an oil lamp, chalk on stone. He drew arrows and lines, center back, flanks forward, a pocket, a trap, death. Ren looked at the drawing for a long time. Then she said it was madness. The center does not retreat. The center holds. That's the first rule. The first thing they teach in freshman year. The center is a wall. A wall doesn't move. He said that a wall that doesn't move is a wall that gets bypassed. She said a wall isn't bypassed if it's long enough. He said the Maginot Line was long enough too. She asked what the Maginot Line was. He said it was a wall that got bypassed. Silence. Then Tara laughed, briefly, harshly, more like a cough, but it was laughter, the first time in 4 weeks. He continued. He talked about a feigned retreat, the Mongols, without naming the Mongols, cavalry that attacks and flees, the enemy pursues, the cavalry turns around, the enemy is stretched out, a strike. He told her about the ambush, without mentioning the Teutoburg forest, a narrow road, forest on either side. The column enters, the forest comes alive, the column dies. He told her about the defense in depth, without mentioning Kursk. 3 lines. The first takes the blow and falls back. The second takes it and falls back. The third counterattacks. The enemy has passed 2 lines, tired, stretched out, lost formation. The third line is fresh, fast, fierce. Strike. Every evening a new diagram. Every evening a new story. No names, no dates. No world from which he came. Just a principle. Just mechanics. Just chalk on stone. They absorbed it. Ren memorized it on the first try. Tara argued, but memorized it on the second. Lyra sketched her own variations, and they were surprisingly good. Sai asked questions about positioning. Nor was silent and thought. May listened and nodded. Each took what she needed. Ren saw command decisions. Tara saw defense. Lyra saw attack. Sai saw position. Nor saw systems. May saw weaknesses. 6 different perspectives on a single diagram. 6 different ways to understand a single idea. He stood before them with chalk and saw a class. A real class. Not 30 faces on phones. 6 faces in the semi-darkness, listening as if their lives depended on it. Because they did. On the 5th evening of the 4th week, Noor stayed behind after the others. She stood by the door. He was mopping the floor. She said she wanted to ask him something. Not about tactics. About him. She asked who he was. He said he was a slave. She said that slaves don't know what he knows. She said she was a mage. That mages sense things. Not thoughts. Not emotions. Flows. The movement of air around a person. Every person creates their own pattern. A slave who is afraid creates one pattern. A slave who is angry creates another. A person who teaches creates a third. She said his pattern wasn't a slave's pattern, not a soldier's pattern, not a noblewoman's pattern. His pattern was that of a man who had stood before people 1,000 times, who was used to being looked at, who was used to explaining. She said she didn't know a single slave with a drawing like that. He stood there with a rag, wet hands, a collar. His heart was pounding. Nor was dangerous, not because she was an enemy, because she saw. She literally saw what the others didn't see. He said he couldn't explain. She said she wasn't asking for an explanation. She asked him to remember what she saw, and that if she could see it, someone else might be able to see it too. She left. He stood in the dark armory, alone, a rag in his hand, chalk on the floor. Nor wasn't threatening him, nor was warning him, and that was scarier than a threat. Before the tournament, there were 3 weeks. He knew this because that the academy began to change. The hallways became louder, practices longer, the instructors tougher. On the walls appeared 3 groups of the 4th year that will go to the tournament. Group. Commander Dyra Wells, daughter of the 4th of District. Second group. Commander Kessa Tyron, daughter of the 4th of the Army. The third group. Commander Olin Mar, daughter of the 4th of the Garrison. 3 names, 3 families, 3 groups that represented Red Sword at main event of the year. Gray she-wolves on the list were reserves, 6s on the bench. He saw how Ran looked at the list. She stood in the hallway, her hands at her body, face is motionless, eyes on 3 names. She was 30 seconds, then turned and left. He was the floor beside her. She walked by him and he heard as she breathing, slowly, in control. That's they when they want to hit the wall, but can't. In the evening in the armory, Ran there different, not angry, focused. She said that she needed a plan. Not a plan workout A on get into the, instead one of 3 groups. He looked at her. He thought it impossible. Tired. The 4th year is underway. The 3rd is not. She said that the charter provides replacement in the event if the 4th year does participate, the qualifying. If the team shows unacceptably low result in the examination over 10 days before the tournament, that replaces is replaced, the best team of the class. He asked when this happened the time. She said never. He asked what result is considered unacceptable low. She said a complete defeat. 0 wins out of 3 test matches. He thought for a minute. Total defeat. 0 out of 3. For the 4th year of the Red Sword is impossible. They are stronger any 3rd of the 3rd year. They trained for years. They daughters of the influential families. There will be replaced because that they cannot be replaced. Ren said that the 3rd group is weak. Olin Mar weak commander. The group is holding on 2 soldiers, spearwoman and a shield bearer. The rest are average. If remove the spearwoman and the shield bearer, the rest will fall apart. He said that can't remove 2 female cadets from the group, out 10 days before the tournament. Ren said that not to isn't necessary. We need that they lose. 3 test battles, 3 defeats. In test group of the 4th year are fighting against the day of the 3rd. This a test of form, usually a formality. The seniors win. The younger ones learn. Everyone are satisfied. But if the younger group wins, if the younger group wins 3 times out 3, that according the bylaws. He understood. The Grey She-Wolves must defeat the 3rd group of the 4th year in the examination. 3 times. Clean. Convincing. So convincing that the command not have choice but replacing him. He looked at 6 faces in the dim light. 3 weeks ago they were a good group. Now they were the best group in the class. But the 3rd year is the 3rd year. The 4th is the 4th. A year of experience. A year of training. A year of growth. The difference in strength is real, not symbolic. He said it was possible. Said that strength isn't the only factor. Form is more important than strength. Synchronization is more important than experience. Tactics are more important than power. He said it would take 3 weeks of absolute dedication. Every night. No skips. No exceptions. He said they needed to study the 3rd group. How they move. How they form up. How they react to pressure. Where their weak spots are. He said they needed reconnaissance. Ren nodded. She had already thought about it. The next day, Ren began observing the 4th year training sessions. Openly. It wasn't forbidden. Cadets could watch any training sessions. She stood in the stands and watched. In the evening, she reported back to him. The third group, Olin Mar. Standard formation, a wedge. Olin in front, a swordswoman, middle. Not bad, but not outstanding. A spearwoman next to her. Bren. Tall, long arms. She holds her spear 1.5 meters farther than standard. That's her advantage. Distance. No one gets close. Shield bearer, Korra. Broad, heavy. A shield the size of a door. Stands like a wall, literally. He listened. Drew. Thought. Bren with a long spear. Distance. An advantage that becomes a weakness if the distance is closed. A long spear is useless in close combat. If someone slips under the shaft, Bren will be left holding a stick. Korra with a large shield. A wall. An advantage that becomes a weakness if struck from above. A large shield is heavy. A heavy shield is slow. A slow shield can't keep up with an overhead strike. Olin in the center, an average commander. An advantage that isn't an advantage. An average commander makes average decisions. Predictable decisions. He drew for 3 evenings. Erased. Drew again. By the 4th evening, he had a plan. Simple, like all good plans. The first fight. Terra steps forward. Not Ren. Terra. Shield against shield. Terra presses against Korra. Doesn't try to break through. Presses. Pushes. Forces Korra to move. Korra isn't used to moving. Korra is used to standing still. While Terra presses, Lyra circles around to the right. Quickly. In a wide arc. The target isn't Korra. The target is Bren. Close the distance. Get under the spear. The spear is useless. Bren is knocked out. Without the spearwoman, the formation loses its depth. Ren strikes from the left, nor disrupts the rhythm with the mage Olin, if there is a mage. Mei shoots at the legs. Sai controls the center. 3 minutes, maybe 4. Ren listened. Traced his chalk lines with her finger. Checked. Asked. What if Korra doesn't budge? What if Bran sees Lyra? What if Olin changes the formation? He answered. Every question. Every what if. Because Hannibal asked those questions too. And Scipio. And Napoleon. And every commander who drew up a plan knew that the plan wouldn't survive the first clash. But a man without a plan won't survive that either. 3 weeks. 21 evenings. He slept no more than 4 hours a day. Buckets and rags by day. Chalk and the armory by night. His body ached. A young body. 18 years old. But even an 18-year-old body can't handle 4 hours of sleep for 3 weeks straight. He was losing weight. Morrow noticed. Morrow said he looked like a corpse. Said that if a slave died of exhaustion, the cost of a replacement would be deducted from his pay. 12 copper coins. Morrow wasn't joking. Morrow never joked. He ate more. Not because he wanted to. Because he couldn't afford to fail. Not now. The inspection was in 2 weeks. The tournament in 3. They needed him. For the first time in his life, he was needed. For real. Not like a teacher who could be replaced by another teacher. Like the only person in this world who had seen Kana. Who knew that retreat could be a lie. Who understood that strength wasn't the only answer. The day before the evaluation, Ren came to the armory alone. Without the group. Late. Later than usual. She sat down on the floor across from him. She was silent for a long time. Then she said that if they lost tomorrow, it would all be over. Not for her. For him. She said that if the she-wolves didn't make it to the tournament, the secret training would lose its meaning. The cadets would go their separate ways. The secret would become unnecessary. And an unnecessary secret is a dangerous secret. People keep secrets that have value. A secret without value is just information. Information leaks out. She said it calmly, like a fact. He understood. If the Wolf Girls lost tomorrow, his protection would vanish. The 6 cadets who had kept quiet because the secret gave them an advantage would stop keeping quiet once that advantage disappeared. Not out of spite, out of indifference. The secret would lose its weight, and someone would let a word slip. By accident, at lunch, in conversation. And that word would reach the instructor. He said they wouldn't lose. Ren looked at him, asked how he knew. He said he didn't know. He believed. She stood up, left. He remained on the floor, chalk in his hand, the plan for tomorrow's fight before his eyes. 3 options, just in case, for every what if. He went through each one in his mind, step by step, strike by strike, like before a test, like before the Olympics, like before every exam he'd been preparing for over 9 years. The difference was that on an exam, the stakes were a B or an A. Here, the stakes were his life. The test audition began at noon. The sun was high in the sky. The field was with light. The stands are packed. Not inspection auditions were gathered crowds. But the staff was in full, 12 women in full armor. On central seat sat the commandant of the academy. He didn't know her name, he twice of the time. Tall, gray hair, a scar across eyebrow, armor with a red sword on the breastplate. She did come to regular auditions. She came to this one. He was standing by the wall. A bucket, a rag, bandages in case injuries. Water, its place. His role, invisibility. The third group of the 4th year went first. Olenmar ahead, short, sturdy. Her face is calm. Behind her, Brend with a spear, a long shadow on the sand from a 2-meter pole. The bark with shield. The shield glistened in sun. There are 3 fighters, swordswoman, archer, mage. Standard set, strong group, not the best in the academy, but 4th year is 4th year. The gray female wolves went out second, Ren in front. The cull is stony, not a single emotion. Behind Terra, the shield lower than 3 weeks ago, on 2 fingers. Lyra to left flank, hands on the handles, 2 of the blade. Fingers don't tremble. Sai with a spear in formation, north to the right. May behind everyone. Luke in hand. An arrow on the bowstring. Hands are still. He looked at May's. They shaking. 3 weeks ago they were trembling. Now no. The method worked. Gradual getting used to it. 1 witness. 2. 3. 6. 20. Now the podium. Instructors. The commandant. Hands are motionless. He exhaled. Instructor Vera stepped the field. She raised the flag. She announced the first match. 3 fights, 3 rounds, 3 wins are needed. The flag has fallen. The moved forward. Not Ren. Terra. According plan. Shield ahead. Straight toward Cora. Cora stood up. She got ready to take the blow. Terra crashed into her. The shield into shield. The clang of metal. The held firm. The pressed down. She tried to get around it. She tried hit. I pushed. I shoved. Step. Another step. Cora moved. Slowly. Reluctantly. But she was moving. She wasn't used to this. The shield bearer stands. The armadillo does not retreat. That rule. The first rule of the shield bearer. Terra broke the rule. Not skill. Stubbornness. Lyra went to the right. Quickly. Quietly. Across a wide arc. He saw. Just as Bran turned her head. She saw movement. She swung her spear. The long shaft swayed. Lyra dove. Under the shaft. Under its reach. Under its advantage. The spear passed over her head. Lyra found herself within striking distance. A meter from Bran. A spear is useless at a meter. A stick. Lyra struck with 2 blades. Wooden ones. Training blades. But fast. To the hands. Bran dropped the spear. The instructor's flag. Bran was knocked out. Olin reacted too late. For a second. Just 1 second. She turned toward Lyra, exposed her left side. Ren struck from the left. Clean hit. To the ribs. Olin doubled over. Flag. 2 knocked out in 30 seconds. Without their commander and spearwoman, the formation fell apart. The remaining 4 fought on autopilot. Sai held the center. Mei fired. Nor knocked down the enemy mage with a burst. The girl flew back 2 steps. Fell. Flag. It was over in 2 minutes. 6-2. The she-wolves lost Lyra, and the enemy swordswoman knocked Terra out with a blow to the knee after the formation had already collapsed. But 6-2. Victory. He stood by the wall, the wet rag in his clenched fist. He hadn't breathed for the last 30 seconds. 10-minute break. He handed out water, gathered the broken arrows, swept the sand. Ren walked past him to the bench. Didn't look. Didn't nod. Right. No contact in front of witnesses. He looked at the stands. Vera was saying something to the commander. The commander was listening. Her face was impassive, her eyes on the field. He couldn't read that face. The second fight started faster. The third group regrouped. Olin changed tactics. Not a wedge, a line. A wide one. Cora in the center. Bren, without a spear, took a sword. A short one, unfamiliar. But Olin decided that a wide front would prevent Lyra from flanking them. He watched and thought. Option 2. He had anticipated this. If the enemy spread out, the center would become thin. A thin center breaks with a strike to a single point. Ren knew it. She raised her sword. The she-wolves moved. Not in a fan formation, not in a line. A spearhead. All 6 to a single point. Straight into the center. Straight at Cora. Cora took the blow. Ren on the left, Terra on the right. Lyra a second later. 3 strikes at a single point. Cora held her ground on the first. She swayed on the second. She retreated on the third. Sai struck with her spear through the breach. She hit the swordswoman behind Cora in the thigh. Flag. Nor pushed Bren with a blast of air. Bren, wielding an unfamiliar sword, lost her balance. Mei fired. A blunt arrow to the chest. A flag. The center collapsed in 40 seconds. Olin was left with 2 fighters against 6. She raised her hand. Surrender. He exhaled. 2-0. One more fight. Break. He handed her water, put away the arrows, looked at Ren. She was drinking water. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She was ready. She had been ready 3 weeks ago. He looked at the stands. The commandant stood up. She walked to the edge. She looked down. At the field. At the gray wolves. Her face was still impassive, but she had stood up. She hadn't stood up after the first fight. Vera stood beside her. She was speaking. The commandant wasn't listening. She was watching the formation. How the 6 third years stood together. Not side by side. Together. The third fight. The last one. Olin led the group out. Their faces changed. Confusion. Anger. Fear. They didn't understand what was happening. 2 minutes ago, they were the seniors. 4th year. The elite. Now they were losing to the 3rd years 2-0. Olin regrouped. A wedge. Another wedge. Back to what she knew. To what she'd trained for 4 years. When a person panics, they revert to what's familiar. He knew that. Every general in history knew that. Olin was panicking. Quietly. Inside. But she was panicking. Ren raised her sword. Option 3. He'd come up with it on the 3rd night. Simple. A feigned retreat. The Mongolian principle. The she-wolves moved forward. They collided with the wedge. Terra took the blow. Ren struck. Then she retreated. 1 step. Terra retreated. Lyra retreated. All at once. Back. Olin saw the retreat. Saw the weakness. rushed forward, the whole wedge forward, fast, hard, in pursuit. They took 3 steps, 4, 5. The formation stretched out. Cora fell behind. The shield was heavy. Bren broke ahead. Olin was in front of everyone. Ren stopped, turned around, struck. Olin didn't expect it. The retreat became an attack in an instant. Olin parried the blow. But Lyra was already on the left, Tara on the right. May shot forward. Nor pushed. Sai struck with her spear. 3 seconds. 4 flags. Olin stood alone, without her group, sword in hand, 6 wolf girls around her. She lowered her sword, raised her hand. 3-0. Silence in the stands. Then Vera turned to the commandant. The commandant stood, silent, the scar on her eyebrow white in the sunlight. She looked at the field, at the 6 third-year students standing in formation, straight, calm, as if they hadn't just done the impossible. He stood by the wall, a bucket in his hand, a rag slung over his shoulder, a collar around his neck. He looked at the field and saw what he had seen 1,000 times in chalk on the blackboard. Canny, Mukden, Tannenberg. The plan worked. Here, in this world, on this field. 3,000 years of military history had been right. Again. Then he heard the commandant's voice, loud, steady, like metal. The commandant said that the 3rd group of the 4th year had been disqualified from the tournament. A replacement group would be appointed by the end of the day. He lowered his eyes. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. He hid them behind the bucket. No one looked at the slave. No one ever looked at the slave. Right now, that was a salvation. In the evening, the academy buzzed. Whispers in corridors, glances in the dining hall. The 3rd-year students replaced the 4th year. This had happened before. Not timed through the history of the sword. He heard snippets of conversations while he washed the floors. The cadets in their year were in fury. The 3rd group Olin Mar in disgrace. Olin did not from the room after the examination. Her shield-bearer Cora sat in dining room and was silent. Her face was gray. Her eyes were empty. For the 2 Toulouse 3rd-year students is not a defeat. It's a death sentence. Rod Mar will lose his place in the distribution. Will lose best positions. Will lose voice in the council. 1 field, 3 battles, 10 minutes, and a career of 4 generations is in question. He wiped the floor and thought about that didn't thought before, about the price. Every victory of the gray is someone's defeat. Every position is someone's. He taught tactics and saw shooting on chalk, not people, not fate, not kind that collapse because 10 minutes into the field. On board at school, it were numbers on the map. Hannibal destroyed 50,000 at Canny. A figure, paragraph, date for the test. Here for each arrow, there a face. He saw face Corey in dining room. I saw empty eyes. He drew with chalk her defeat 3 nights in a row. I planned. I calculated. I was happy when the plan worked out. And Cora sat in dining room with facing Ave at whose had future. He didn't regret. He could allow. Pity is luxury for people without a collar. But he remembered. He remembered that the hands on the floor are people, and what every plan has a price that someone else. In the evening, it's unusually quiet. The she-wolves sat on floor. They training. We sat. Tara smiled. For the first time in a time. Broadly. Teeth are white. A scar on the she stretched out. She said that face Olin when she raised her in 3rd time. It was all nights without sleep. Lyra laughed. Quietly. Nervously. Like a person who doesn't believe that happened anything that happened. May sat by the wall and held a bow on her knees. Her hands were still. She didn't smile. she was calm. For May, she was more than a smile. Sai brushed the tip of spearhead, methodically, slowly, just always. Noor sat in the corner. She watched at him. Only Noor looked at him. The rest celebrated among themselves. Noor watched and remained silent. Ren didn't celebrated. Ren stood, her arms crossed. Her face was serious. She waited until they died down. Then she said that until the tournament, 2 weeks events, she said that they replaced the weak group and now represent Red Sword. She said that if they lose in the tournament, then it is triple. The shame for themselves, shame for the academy, shame for those who were replaced. That they what? That the third group was better. They'll say that the replacement was a mistake. They'll say that third-year students didn't do up to the task, and all they achieved will crumble. Silence. Tara stopped smiling. Lyra stopped laughing. Ren said that they would after the tournament, if there were anything to celebrate. Then I looked at him. I said that to promise. He stood up, a chalk in his hand, a collar around his neck. He began to draw. 3 opponents. The Western Frontier, the Northern Wall, the Silver Shield. 3 academies. 3 groups each. 9 battles. The She-Wolves will fight 3, 1 against each academy. They need to win at least 2 out of 3 to score points. 3 out of 3 to prove the substitution was justified. He drew from memory. The map from the armory. 3 years of results. Diagrams of past tournaments. Patterns. Styles. Weaknesses. The Western Frontier. The new wedge. 3 lines. Heavy units in front. Swordswomen on the flanks. Archers in the rear. Cannons. He had already analyzed this. On the first day, in the first week, when he overheard a conversation between 2 instructors. 5 weeks had passed since then. He thought about it every evening. He had 4 possible responses. The Northern Wall. A different style. Defensive. Tight formation. Large shields. Spears from the second line. They didn't attack. They waited. They provoked an attack and countered. Patient. Disciplined. Boring. Like Wellington at Waterloo. A line that stands and waits until the enemy breaks. You can't attack them head on. You can't press them. That's what they want. You need patience against them. Or cunning. The Silver Shield. The weakest academy. But weakest doesn't mean weak. Their style is agile. Quick repositioning. Changing the direction of the attack. They made up for their lack of strength with speed. Like light cavalry against heavy infantry. Not stronger, faster. He drew one. Explained 2. 3 options for each opponent. Primary, backup, emergency. Ren memorized them. Asked questions. 1 question after each diagram. Always precise. Always to the point. She wasn't a tactician. She was becoming one. Every evening, every conversation, every question brought her 1 step closer to seeing the battlefield as he did. Not as a chalkboard map, as a system. He saw it, and it was the best thing he'd seen in 2 lifetimes. A student who surpasses the teacher. Not because she's smarter, because she can do what the teacher cannot. She could go out onto the battlefield. He couldn't. She could take up a sword. He couldn't. She could command. He could only draw with chalk on the floor. His knowledge without her was a drawing on stone. Her strength without him was a wedge in the forehead. Together, they were something this world had never seen. After class, everyone dispersed. He stayed behind to erase the chalk. A habit. A ritual. A wet rag on the stone. No traces remain. He was almost finished when the door opened. Not Ren. Not Noor. Marrow. The old slave stood in the doorway. Left hand at his side. Right hand with 3 fingers on the doorframe. He was looking at the floor. At the wet spots where the lines had just been. At the chalk in the hero's hand. At the oil lamp that usually wasn't lit in the armory after lights out. Marrow said he knew. Silence. The collar squeezed his throat. or so it seemed. Marrow said he'd known for 2 weeks, said he wasn't deaf or blind, that the armory was right next to the boiler room, that he heard voices every night, that he saw chalk on his hands every morning, that he wasn't an idiot. He stood and waited for Marrow to say more. Marrow could have gone to the instructor, could have told the commandant, could have sold the information to other slaves. Information is currency, even for slaves, especially for slaves. Marrow said he wouldn't go anywhere. He said he was 11 years old. For 11 years, he'd scrubbed floors and carried buckets and lost fingers and watched slaves get killed for a wrong look. For 11 years, he'd existed, not lived, existed. And in 11 years, not a single slave had done what he was doing. Not a single one had spoken. Not a single one taught. Not a single one stood before the general's daughters with chalk and explained to them how to fight. Marrow said he didn't understand how he did it. He didn't understand where the knowledge came from. He didn't understand why the cadets listened. But he saw the result. He saw it today at the review. 6 third-year cadets destroyed the fourth years the way adults destroy children. Marrow said he wouldn't go to the instructor for one reason. Because for the first time in 11 years, he'd seen a slave whom people listened to. And he was curious to see how it would end. Marrow left. The door closed. He stood in the armory, chalk in his hand, a rag on the floor. One more person knew. 7. 6 cadets and an old slave. 7 threads on which his life hung. Noor had warned that if she saw it, others would see it too. Marrow had been listening through the wall for 2 weeks. The commandant watched from the stands and said nothing. Vera asked questions. The structure held. But the walls were getting thinner, with every day, with every victory, with every glance. He blew out the lamp. He went out. The corridor was dark, cold, stone walls. He walked to the small room by the boiler room and counted. 2 weeks until the tournament. 7 people know his secret. 1 commandant suspects. 1 instructor asks questions. An away tournament. Another academy. Another field. Different rules. And if the she-wolves win there just as they won here, the question will cease to be a question. The question will become an investigation. He lay down on the mattress. The ceiling was stained. The collar was cold. He closed his eyes and saw arrows on the floor. Red, blue, white. 3 academies. 9 fights. 2 days. And after those 2 days, the world will know that the gray she-wolves are different. The world will want to know why. And then all the walls will come crashing down. They set out at dawn. 4 wagons. 3 groups of 6 fighters. The instructors. The servants. He rode in the last wagon. With buckets. With rags. With spare bandages and oil for the armor. Marrow sat next to him. Marrow was silent. He stared at the road. The road led north. A 2-day journey. The tournament was held on the territory of the western frontier. Neutral ground. Every year a different academy hosted it. This year, the western frontier. He looked at the landscape. For the first time in 6 weeks, he had left the walls of the academy. For the first time, he saw this world beyond the stone courtyard and the training hall. Fields, forests, villages, low houses made of gray stone, people on the roadside, men with carts, women on horses, children by the road, men below, women above. Everywhere, not just at the academy, the whole system, the whole hierarchy. A man with a cart gave way to a woman on horseback, not out of politeness, out of order, just as a peasant gives way to a nobleman, just as a slave gives way to a free man. He watched and memorized. Wren was riding in the first cart. He saw her red hair when the wind blew back the canopy. She sat upright. She looked ahead. She didn't look back. Tara was beside her. Behind them were the rest of the Wolfuses. In the second and third wagons were the fourth-year groups, Dyravels's first group and Kessatyron's second group, the main roster, the ones for whom the Academy was traveling to the tournament. The Grey Wolfuses were the third group, the substitutes, an addition, formally. But everyone in the caravan knew what had happened at the review. Everyone knew that the third years had destroyed the fourth year. And everyone was watching. He could feel the stares even from the last wagon. On the first night, he slept by the fire with the other slaves, 4 of them, all from the academy, silent, accustomed to it. He lay on the ground and looked at the stars, different stars, not the ones that had been above the wet asphalt on his last evening. Different constellations, a different sky, a different world, the same collar. On the morning of the second day, the column moved on. By noon, he saw a fortress, large, stone, red flags on the towers. No, not red, blue. The western border. Their color is blue. The fortress stood on a hill, a field all around, wide, flat, trampled. A training field the size of 3 academies, grandstands around the perimeter, wooden, tall. He counted 4 sectors, 4 academies, 4 colors, red, blue, white, silver. Red sword, western frontier, northern wall, silver shield. The wagon stopped at the red sector. The cadets disembarked. He hauled chests of armor. Morrow carried weapons. Other slaves pitched tents. The red sword camp. 6 tents, 3 for the groups, 1 for the instructors, 1 for the commandant, 1 for the servants. He worked until evening, unloading, setting up, preparing the armor, sharpening the training weapons. In this world, even training swords were made of metal. Dull, heavy, but metal. Not wood like at the internal inspections. Here, they fought more seriously. Here, bones were broken. He saw it on the faces of slaves from other academies. One from the western frontier was limping, an old fracture. Another from the northern wall carried water with one hand. The other hung limply. Slaves at tournaments were expendable. Bring water. Clean up the blood. Carry out the wounded. Take a stray blow if you didn't manage to get out of the way. Morrow said that a slave from the Silver Shield had died at the last tournament. An arrow missed its target and struck him in the throat. A training arrow. A blunt one. But a throat isn't a shield. Morrow said it as if he were talking about the weather. Rain tomorrow. A slave died yesterday. Same weight. In the evening, he couldn't get into the armory. There was no armory. There were tents. Thin fabric walls. Voices could be heard through 2 layers. No secrets. No chalk on the floor. No diagrams. He stood by the servant's tent and thought. 2 weeks of preparation. 3 options for each opponent. Everything in their heads. His and Ren's. She knew the plans. She memorized every diagram, every option, every if. He's no longer needed. Not here. Not on the field. His work ended in the armory 3 days ago. Now he's a rag and a bucket again. Ren walked past his tent, by chance, or not by chance. She slowed her pace, didn't turn her head, whispered a single word. Third. He understood. The third group of the western frontier. Their first opponent. Tomorrow. In the morning. She left. He lay in the tent. Morrow snored nearby. Outside, the noise of the camp. Voices. Laughter. The clang of weapons. 4 academies. 200 cadets. Dozens of instructors. Hundreds of spectators. And 1 slave who knew more than anyone else, who couldn't say a word, who lay on the ground with a collar and listened as the world prepared for the battle he had planned. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow. The third group of the western frontier. That very wedge. 3 lines. Heavy infantry in front. Sword fighters on the flanks. Archers in the rear. Cannons. He saw the answer as clearly as he saw the ceiling of his cramped room every night. Ren saw it too. He had taught her to see. Now all that remained was to wait. Morning of the tournament. The sun. Wind from the east. The course is dry. Good. Wet field slows heavy fighters. Dry gives an advantage to agile fighters. The she-wolves are more agile. He noticed this instinctively. As the instructor notices the error in the test. How the pilot notes the wind. Professional reflex. Only his profession does exist in this world. The stands were filling up. Not as at in-house examinations. Completely. 4 sectors. 4 colors. Red, blue, white, silver. Banners. Coats of arms. Flags of the regiments. He saw the faces in stands. Only female cadets. Officers. Generals. Women in ceremonial armor with swords at their belts. Men behind in civilian clothes. Quiet. Inconspicuous. Just him. The tournament was the military elite. Here, careers, assignments, marriages of families, alliances, clans. Field below was an arena. The stands were a marketplace. It stood at edge the red sector. A bucket, rag, bandages. His place. First match of the day was a battle of Volchits, the first group of the Red Sword. Dyra Wells, 4th year, main lineup. Against them, the second group of the Northern Wall. He looked. Dyra was beautiful, fast, skillful, strong. Her group moved in unison. Not as the she-wolves, worse. But for the standard, it's great. Wedge, head-on impact, pressure. North Wall held 3 minutes. Then it broke. The Red Sword defeated 4-2. Tribune of the Red section roared. The second round. The second group of the Red Sword. Kessa Tyron. Against the third group of the Silver Shield. A quick victory. 5-1. The Silver Shield was weaker. Kessa crushed them with her strength. Standard. Wedge. Head-on. Power. 2 matches. 2 victories. The Red Sword was in the lead. The stands were pleased. The third match. The Gray She-Wolves. Against the third group from the western frontier. It was announced. The stands fell silent. Everyone knew. 3rd years. The replacements. Those very ones. He stood by the wall and watched as the Wolfuses took the field. Ren in front. Steady stride. Back straight. Red hair tied in a bun. Armor spotless. He'd cleaned it that morning. With his own hands. Every plate, every strap. Behind them came the third group of the western frontier. He saw the formation, and his heart skipped a beat. A wedge. 3 lines. The heavy ones in front. Just as he'd heard 6 weeks ago from the 2 instructors in the training hall. Just as he'd drawn with chalk on the first evening. Kana, in the flesh, right in front of him. Not on a board. Not in a textbook. 6 living people in a formation 2,000 years old. The flag fell. Ren didn't move. The she-wolves stood. The western frontier advanced. The wedge moved slowly. The heavy units in front set the pace. The swordswomen on the flanks lagged slightly behind. The archers behind the formation began to shoot. Arrows flew. Blunt. Heavy. Tara raised her shield. She took 2 arrows. The clang of metal. The wolf women stood. They didn't move. They waited. He saw how Ren watched the wedge. Saw how she counted the steps. How she gauged the distance. How she waited for the moment. He had taught her this. Don't attack the wedge head-on. The wedge is stronger head-on. The wedge is weaker from the sides. Wait until the wedge passes the point of no return. until momentum carries it forward, until stopping is harder than continuing. Then strike from the side. The wedge had crossed half the field, 2/3. The heavy ones in front had picked up speed, momentum, mass, strength. They advanced like a wall. Ren raised her sword, the signal. The she-wolves split up, Ren and Lyra to the right, Terra and Sai to the left, Mei to the rear, Nor to the center. The wedge struck empty air. Where 6 people had stood a second ago, there was no one. Nor stood alone. In the center, in front of the wedge. The heavy ones in front swung. Nor struck the air. A short, directed blast into the faces of the front 3. Not strong. Sufficient. Eyes. Dust. Sand. For a split second, the front 3 saw nothing. Lyra struck from the right, into the side of the wedge. 2 blades struck the ribs of the outermost swordswoman. A flag. Ren struck the gap between the heavy warrior and the swordswoman. Clean. Between the plates. Not painful, but precise. A flag. On the left, Terra rammed the side of the wedge with her shield. She pushed. The formation swayed. Sai thrust her spear through the breach. The archer behind the formation didn't have time to dodge. Spear in the shoulder. Flag. Mei fired from behind their backs. The arrow passed between Terra and Sai, hit the second archer in the thigh. Flag. 4 taken out in 20 seconds. The 2 remaining stood in the middle of the collapsed wedge, around the she-wolf. The commander of the western frontier lowered her sword. She raised her hand. 6-0. Silence. Then the stands in the blue sector roared. Not with joy. With shock. Their third group had been wiped out in 30 seconds. The red sector was silent for 3 seconds. Then it exploded. He stood by the wall, a bucket at his feet. His hands were shaking. He hid them behind his back. He had just seen Canna in reverse. The wedge that had worked for 2,000 years was dismantled in 30 seconds by 6 girls he had taught in the basement by the light of an oil lamp. 3,000 years of military history, chalk on stone, a collar around the neck, and here was the result, on the field, in broad daylight, before hundreds of eyes. Ren was leaving the field. She walked past him, didn't look, didn't slow down, but he saw her hand, her right one. She clenched her fist, for a second, and unclenched it. He understood. It was a thank you. The only thank you the general's daughter could afford to give a slave in front of everyone. A clenched fist. A second. He remembered. After the first day, Red Sword was leading on points. 3 bouts. 3 victories. But everyone was talking not about Daira and not about Kessie. Everyone was talking about the she-wolves. About the third-year cadets who had destroyed the Western Frontier's wedge in half a minute. He heard the conversations by the tents in the evening. Instructors from other academies, cadets, officers, everyone was asking the same thing. What had that been? Where had the third-year cadets learned such discipline? Who had taught them? The question hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. He cleaned up the field after the battles, collected arrows, wiped away blood. 2 cadets had suffered serious injuries in Daira's battle. One had broken a finger. He handed out bandages, poured water. He was invisible. That evening, Morrow sat down next to the tent, silently. Then he said he'd overheard a conversation between 2 instructors from the Western Frontier. They were discussing the battle. One said the Wolfus's formation was unconventional, that nothing like it existed in any textbook. The other said it resembled something ancient, something from the archives, something that hadn't been taught in 100 years. Morrow looked at him. He said that if the instructors started digging through the archives, they wouldn't find anything. Because what he knows isn't in any archives of this world. And then the question would become even louder. He nodded. Morrow was right. The archives wouldn't help. They wouldn't help because the Kanas happened on another planet, in another story, in another world that no one here can even imagine. He lay down. The stars were foreign. The wind was cold. Tomorrow was the second day. 2 battles, the Northern Wall and the Silver Shield, and every victory made the question louder. Every victory brought closer the moment when someone would stop asking what and start asking who. The second day began with rain, light, cold. The field soaked through. He stood at the edge of sector and looked at dirt under my feet. The wet field. Heavy soldiers get bogged down. Light slip. The shields are wet. Grips are unreliable. Everything is changing. He thought about this while he was buckets. Plans that he drew with chalk were for the field, for a flat surface, for standard conditions. Rain changed everything. Lyra slipped wood on wet sand. Her speed is her weapon. Wet sand slows speed. May shot would worse. Wet bowstring loses its power. Arrows fly lower. Terra would have 2. Heavy shield, heavy armor. On wet field, stability is more important speed. He could talk with Ren. Not here. Not with everyone. It's eyes. Eyes. Too many ears. The tents are thin. The camp is cramped. Any whisper slave to toward of a female cadet is death, he thought, feverishly, quickly, like a teacher who realized in 5 minutes before the exam that he gave to the disciples not the ticket. The first fight Volchits today against the Northern Wall. Defensive style. Dense construction. Large shields. They are waiting. They counter. On wet field their style became even stronger. They and already did moving. The wet field punishes those who moves. Plan to the north wall called for a detour with the flank. Lyra on the right. Quick sprint. Approach to rear. On wet field, Lyra will run a breakaway. It will fall. He needs had pass ran one thought, one word, one correction. Not flank. Center. On wet field, attack the center. Heavy. Terra. Pressure in one point. North wall is used to hold the line. If you press in one point for a long time and persistently, that line will hold out. No, because that weak. But that the pressure at point creates fatigue. The shield bearer in center gets tired faster than the rest. When gets the shield, it is lowered. When the shield is lowered, the line breaks. He carried water to the tent Volchits. He set down a bucket. Ren was inside. He heard voices. Ren said to the group, he could enter. He could shout. Could write a note, because that slaves don't write. Slaves don't know write. If he is caught with a note, then the question is, in that it is. The question where thee knows the letters. Marrow approached. He stood beside him. He looked at him. I looked at the tent. Marrow was old. Marrow was smart. Marrow understood. Marrow said that he needed take clean bandages. Marrow entered the tent. A minute he came out. He said that the redhead had asked the slave to check the fastenings on armor. He entered. 6 faces turned toward him. He stood at the entrance with a bucket. The female cadets in armor. Ren, Terra, Lyra, Sai, Nor, May. Everyone were watching. He said one sentence. He that the field changes the plan, and we need to push the center Terra, and not bypass Lyra. Ren looked at him for seconds. Then she nodded. He left. Marrow stood outside. He looked from around. He kept watch. 11 years in slavery taught Marrow a lot. In that, to keep watch. The began in an hour. It did stop. The field is muddy, wet. The north wall has into its style. Line, wide, thick. 5 shields in front, spearwoman in formation. They stood and were waiting, like Wellington, like a wall. The she-wolves came out. Ren reorganized. Not fan formation, not a wedge, A wedge, on the contrary, the in front, point. Ren and Lyra behind them, shoulder to shoulder, Sai and Nor behind them, Mei behind, narrow deep build, spear and not hammer. They moved, slowly. On wet field but it's hard. Container went first, the shield in her, legs wide, stable. She didn't slip. It pressed the sand. The northern wall waited. Their commander was watching at formation Volchitz. He saw her face. She didn't understand. Narrow build. One point of impact. No one does. Did. No one did struck with a spear at the wall. Everyone were with a hammer. Wide. All the front. Terra struck to the center, in spot point, toward shield bearer opposite. The in-shield. A crash. Wet metal. Ren struck against that same shield bearer. On the right, Lyra on the left. 3 strikes to a single point, simultaneously. The shield bearer held her ground, but she swayed. Terra struck again. Ren again. Lyra again. Pressure. Constant. Unrelenting. To a single point. The northern wall shield bearer was beginning to tire. He could see it. The shield slightly lower, her legs slightly narrower, breathing slightly faster. 30 seconds of constant pressure on a single point. The shield bearer took a step back, a small step, but a line is a line. 1 step back in the center is a breach. A breach is a gap. Sai thrust her spear into the gap, through the space between the shields. She struck the spearwoman behind the formation in the shoulder. A flag. Nor blew air into the gap. Wet sand and water flew into their faces. The shield-bearer in the center flinched. Terra struck one last time. The shield-bearer fell. A flag. The line broke. A hole in the center. Ren stepped into the hole. Lyra followed her. 30 seconds. 4 flags. The northern wall crumbled from within. The 2 remaining ones rushed to the flanks. Mei fired. Hit one in the knee. Wet bowstring. The arrow went lower than it should have. But the knee is a target too. Flag. The last one raised her hand. 6-0. Again. In the rain. On the wet field. The silence in the stands lasted longer than on the first day. Then the white sector of the northern wall roared. Not in shock, in anger. Their line was considered impenetrable. 3 years undefeated in defense. The she-wolves broke through it in 30 seconds. The red sector roared. He stood by the wall, a bucket at his feet, soaked to the skin. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from the fact that the plan had worked. The revised plan. 10 minutes before the battle. One suggestion in the tent. Tara, not Lyra. Center, not flank. One change. The difference between victory and disaster. The second battle in 2 hours. Silver shield. The rain had stopped. The field was beginning to dry out. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were moving westward. By the time of the battle with Silver Shield, the field would be half dry. That meant the plan could revert to the original. Speed and maneuver. Silver Shield was mobile, quick repositioning, changing directions. Against them, they needed counter-mobility. Don't stand still, move with them, mirror them, wait for a mistake. He couldn't convey this to Ren. Morrow couldn't enter the tent twice in one day. They'd notice. But Ren knew the plan. She had memorized 3 options for the Silver Shield. The main one was exactly this. Mirror. Counter-mobility. He trusted her. A strange feeling. A slave who trusts a cadet. A teacher who trusts a student. The second is more accurate. The battle began at noon. The field was semi-dry. Silver Shield came out and immediately began to move. Quickly. Unexpectedly. Not in formation. Pairs. 3 pairs. Each independent. Each attacks and retreats. Like mosquitoes. Like light cavalry. Bite and retreat. He hadn't expected this. Pairs, not a formation. Silver Shield had changed tactics. Since last year. They had changed too. They too were looking for something new. The she-wolves stood in formation. 3 pairs of the Silver Shield circled around. One attacked from the left. Ren parried. The pair retreated. The second struck from the right. Lyra blocked. The pair withdrew. The third came from behind. May spun around. She fired. Missed. The pair retreated. They were biting. From all sides. Quickly. Briefly. It hurt. The wolf pack formation spun in place. Defending, but not attacking. You can't attack someone who isn't standing still. He watched and saw the problem. The formation is stronger than the pairs, but the formation stands still. The pairs move. A formation that stands still and defends is a target. Sooner or later, a pair will find an opening. Ren saw the same thing. He knew what she saw. He had taught her to see. She raised her sword. A new signal. Not the one they'd trained for. A new one. The wolfesses split up. 3 pairs. Ren and Terra. Lyra and Sai. Nor and May. A mirror image. 3 pairs against 3 pairs. Exclusive videos, story continuations, and bonus content are already available on Patreon before YouTube, so check the link in the description for early access to all new recaps and continuations.